Her name was Alina Vasquez. She was 31 years old, and for the first time in what felt like her entire life, she had finally stopped running. That night was supposed to be perfect. It was her and Leo's second wedding anniversary, and she was 4 months pregnant with their first child. The kind of night you replay in your mind for years. The kind of night you hold on to when everything else falls apart. She had no idea, standing there in that beautifully lit room, that it was about to become the worst night of her life. The living room of their home had been transformed. Soft amber light spilled from candles lined along the windowsills. White flowers Alina could not name but loved anyway filled every corner. A long table ran through the center of the room, covered in food, glasses, and the kind of careful decoration that only happens when someone truly loves you. Leo had planned all of it himself. That was the kind of man he was. Guests had been arriving for over an hour. Friends, colleagues, a handful of Leo's relatives who had slowly, cautiously, begun to warm to Alina over the past 2 years. The house was full of voices and laughter and the low hum of music playing just soft enough to talk over. Alina stood near the far window, her hand resting gently over her stomach. She was not showing much yet, just a small, quiet curve beneath her dress that she touched without thinking whenever she was still. Almost no one in the room knew about the baby. She and Leo had decided to wait a little longer before announcing it. That secret, that small and sacred thing between them, made the whole night feel layered with something warm she could not quite name. Leo appeared beside her. He placed his hand over hers, right there on her stomach, and leaned close. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "More than okay," she said. And she meant it. She really meant it. Because Alina knew what she had come from. She knew what it had cost her to get here. For most of her 20s, she had lived under the weight of 2 parents who used love like a weapon. Her mother twisted every conversation until Alina felt responsible for things she never did. Her father made her small on purpose, quietly, consistently, the way water wears down stone. It had taken her years to understand what was happening to her. It had taken her even longer to walk away from it. But she had. She had built a wall between herself and that life, and on the other side of that wall was Leo. Was this home? Was this child growing quietly inside her? She had not spoken to her parents in almost 2 years, and for the first time, the silence did not feel like loss. It felt like breathing. Leo squeezed her hand and stepped back toward the center of the room. He picked up his glass. The conversations around them began to soften as people noticed. Someone tapped a fork against a cup. Then the room went quiet. Leo looked at Alina first before he looked at anyone else. That small thing, that single moment of eye contact before he spoke, cracked something open in her chest. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about the past 2 years, about learning what a real partnership felt like, about choosing someone not just on the good days but especially on the hard ones. His voice was steady, but Alina could hear the feeling underneath it. She blinked fast. She was not going to cry. She told herself that firmly. She was absolutely going to cry. People around the room were nodding. Someone near the back let out a soft laugh at something Leo said. Alina watched him, this man who had picked her, and she felt the full weight of how lucky she was pressing down on her in the best possible way. Then someone started clapping, and the rest of the room followed. And that was the exact moment the front door opened. At first, no one paid much attention. It was the kind of entrance that could belong to a late guest. A man walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the room with a calm that felt wrong. He was not dressed like someone who had just arrived at a party. He was dressed like someone who had come to do something. He moved through the edge of the room, past the table, past the guests, until he was standing near the center of the floor. He stopped. He turned. He looked directly at Alina. The clapping had faded. Conversations stalled. The music kept playing for a few more seconds before someone reached over and turned it off. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your skin go cold. The man's eyes did not leave Alina's face. She had never seen him before in her life. She did not know his name. She did not know where he had come from, and yet the way he was looking at her made her stomach drop. He reached into the bag at his side, pulled out a thick folder, and slapped it on the nearest table. The sound of it cut through the quiet like something breaking. Then he raised his voice, so every single person in that room could hear him. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but everyone here deserves to know the truth." Elena's heart stopped. He pointed at her. His arm was straight, his finger direct, his voice completely without shame. "That baby she's carrying," he said, "belongs to me." The room did not explode immediately. It collapsed first, into a silence so absolute that Elena could hear the candles on the windowsill flickering. Then the whispers started. Then the gasps. Then the turning of heads and the pressing together of people trying to understand what they had just heard. Elena stood completely still. Her hand was still on her stomach. Her legs had stopped working. "I have never seen you before," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. The man did not even flinch. He opened the folder. He pulled out papers and held them up and passed them to the nearest person standing close enough to reach. Medical reports, dated, detailed. Elena watched the papers move through the room. She watched faces change. She watched eyes shift from confusion to something colder. And then she looked at Leo. He was not looking at the papers. He was not looking at the stranger. He was looking at her, and his expression was something she could not read. Not anger, not doubt, something else entirely. Something that frightened her more than the stranger's words had. The room was no longer a celebration. It had become a courtroom, and everyone was already deciding. Leo's mother stepped forward. The slap came before Elena could react. The sound of it rang across the room. Elena's head turned sharply to the side. Heat spread across her cheek. Her eyes filled instantly with tears she had not given permission to fall. "You brought shame into this house," Leo's mother said. "You need to divorce her," someone else said. "Tonight, right now." "We always knew something was wrong. Look at where she came from." Each voice was a stone. Elena stood in the middle of it all, her hand pressed to her cheek. Her other hand still curved over her stomach, and she tried to find Leo's eyes again through the blur of her tears. He had gone very still, quiet in a way that did not match the chaos around him. He was watching the stranger with an expression Elena had never seen on his face before. Then, slowly, Leo turned to the room. "Let everyone hear all of it," he said quietly. "Every single word." The room froze. Something in his voice stopped the noise like a hand pressed over a flame. And Elena did not know what was coming. She did not know what he meant. She only knew that the way he said it did not sound like a man who was breaking. It sounded like a man who had been waiting. Nobody moved. Not right away. The room held its breath, still suspended in the quiet that Leo's words had created. Elena stood with her hand pressed to her stinging cheek, tears blurring her vision, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She kept her eyes on Leo. He was not looking at her. He was watching the stranger with a steadiness that seemed impossible given everything happening around them. Then the front door opened again. Two people walked in slowly, and when Elena turned and saw who they were, every last drop of warmth drained from her body. Her mother, her father. Her mother's eyes were already glistening, dabbing at the corner of her face with a folded tissue before she had even fully crossed the threshold. Her father had both hands clasped in front of him, his head lowered in the practiced way of a man performing grief for an audience. They moved through the room like they belonged there, greeting no one, walking straight toward the center of things. Elena could not speak, could not move. Her mind was working slowly, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She had not told them about this party. She had not spoken to them in nearly 2 years. They should not have known this address. They should not have been anywhere near this night. But they were here. And they had arrived at exactly the right moment. Leo's mother looked at them with sudden recognition, then with something that looked dangerously like relief. "You came," she said. Elena's mother pressed the tissue to her mouth and nodded. "We got the call," she said softly. "We came as fast as we could." Elena looked between them. The call. Someone had called her parents. Someone in that room, or connected to that room, had known they were coming. The realization landed in her stomach like something cold and heavy. Her father cleared his throat and reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small, worn notebook and handed it to Leo's father without a word. Leo's mother stepped forward and took it instead. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the pages, and her expression hardened into something final. "These are entries from when she was younger," Alina's father said. "Her own handwriting, her own words." He paused. "She has always had a problem with honesty." Alina's mother let out a soft, broken sound, the kind designed to make everyone in the room feel sorry for her. "We tried," she said. "We tried for years, but some things you cannot fix in a child." She looked at Leo directly, her voice dropping with theatrical tenderness. "You deserve better than this, son. You deserve the truth." Leo's father stepped forward and took the notebook. He flipped through a few pages, then passed it to a relative standing nearby. Papers moved around the room again. Heads bent together. Voices dropped low. Alina finally found her voice. "Those are private," she said. "You have no right." Her mother looked at her with an expression Alina had seen 1,000 times growing up. It was the look that said, "You are embarrassing yourself. Stop talking." "We are not here to fight," her mother said calmly. "We are here because we love Leo, and because we cannot keep pretending." Something cracked open inside Alina's chest, not from sadness, from pure, specific recognition, because this was exactly what her parents did. This was the move she had spent 2 years trying to protect herself from. They never attacked directly. They wept. They sighed. They handed people things and let the things do the damage. They made themselves the reasonable ones while the room turned against you. And it was working. She could see it working in real time. Leo's mother turned to Leo with both palms pressed flat together. "Enough is enough," she said. "You have heard it from strangers. You have now heard it from her own parents. What more do you need?" Leo's father moved toward his son. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I built everything I have so that you could carry it forward," he said. "I will not watch you throw it away for someone who has been lying to you from the beginning. If you choose her tonight, you choose her over everything, over this family, over the business, over your name." He let that sit in the air for a moment. "Think carefully." Relatives pressed in. Voices overlapped. One of Leo's uncles said he had always felt something was off. A cousin said that the medical reports were right there, and they matched. Someone else said the photos were proof enough and that Leo was being naive. Alina stopped hearing individual words after a while. It all became one sound. One wall of voices pushing her back into a corner she recognized too well. The corner her childhood had been built in. She looked at her mother once more, the woman who had carried her, the woman who had nursed her through every fever and then used those same memories as ammunition when it suited her. Alina had spent years trying to understand how a mother could do that to her own child. She had eventually stopped trying to understand and simply walked away. But her mother had found her anyway, and she had brought the whole thing with her. "Just come home," her mother said, looking at Alina now. Her voice was almost gentle. "Stop lying, come home." Those 3 words did more damage than the slap had. Alina felt her legs go soft beneath her. She looked at Leo. He was the last face she could find in that room that did not feel like a threat. She searched his eyes for something to hold on to. He was still watching the stranger. There was no fear on his face, no confusion, no crumbling at the edges the way Alina had quietly been terrified he would crumble. His jaw was set. His breathing was controlled. He looked like a man who had already made every decision that needed to be made and was simply waiting for the right second to act on them. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, dialed once, said nothing, and ended the call. 30 seconds later, 2 men Alina had never seen before entered the room from the back hallway. They stood quietly near the edge of the crowd, hands at their sides, watching Leo for instruction. Leo turned to the stranger. His voice came out even, unhurried, almost soft. "Say it again," he said. "Everything you said tonight, say all of it again." The stranger blinked. Something shifted behind his eyes, just slightly, just enough. And that shift was the first thing in the entire night that almost made Alina believe they were going to survive it. The stranger opened his mouth, then closed it again. The room was watching him. Every single person in that space had their eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to repeat what he had said with the same confidence he had walked in with. But something had changed in his posture. His shoulders had dropped a fraction. His weight had shifted back. He looked like a man who had just realized the floor beneath him was not as solid as he thought. Leo saw it too, and then Leo did something nobody in that room expected. He laughed. It was not a long laugh. It was short and low and completely certain. The kind of laugh that does not come from something being funny. The kind that comes from a man who has been holding all the cards and finally deciding to lay them on the table. He turned to the room. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I need 60 seconds of silence from everyone," he said. "Just 60 seconds." Leo's mother started to speak. He raised one hand without looking at her, and she stopped. Not because she wanted to, because something in the way he held himself told everyone in that room that what was coming next was going to change everything. He pulled out his phone. He pressed play. The sound that came through the room's speaker system was not music. It was voices. Recorded, clear, and unmistakable. First came the voice of Alina's mother, soft and precise, walking someone through exactly what to say and when to say it. Then came Leo's mother, her tone clipped and businesslike, confirming a number, confirming a timeline, telling the stranger which documents to present first and which ones to hold back. Then Alina's father, low and flat, saying that the photos had been handled and that everything would look real enough to hold up under pressure. Then came the line that stopped every heart in that room cold. "Make it convincing. We need her gone before the baby is registered." The recording ended. Nobody breathed. Alina stood completely still. She heard those words and felt them move through her body like ice water. "Gone before the baby is registered." Her own mother's voice. Her own mother had sat across a table from Leo's parents and planned this night like a business transaction, and the currency they had used was Alina's dignity and her unborn child's future. Alina's mother's face had gone the color of old paper. Her father stared at the floor. Leo's mother had both hands pressed over her mouth. Leo's father had taken one step backward, as if distance from himself was possible. Leo was not finished. He turned to the room and spoke clearly, without raising his voice, because he did not need to. He told them that 6 months ago, quietly and privately, he had undergone a vasectomy reversal, a medical procedure confirmed by his personal physician, who was present in the room that very night. He pointed once, and a man near the far wall nodded. Leo then stated, simply and without drama, that the medical reports the stranger had presented were dated during a window of time when conception was biologically impossible for anyone but him. The documents were forged. The timeline was fabricated. Every piece of evidence that had been passed around that room was constructed by people who were supposed to love both of them. One of Leo's uncles looked at the papers in his hands as if they had turned into something he did not want to be holding. A cousin set her copy down on the table and stepped back from it. The room had gone from a courtroom to something quieter and more shameful than that. The stranger looked once at Alina's father, and that single look confirmed everything that needed confirming. Leo's father cleared his throat and began to speak. Leo did not let him finish. "You hired someone to walk into my home," Leo said. His voice was still quiet, still even. That quietness was the most devastating thing in the room. "You sat at a table with her parents and you paid a man to stand in front of my pregnant wife and call her a liar, in front of our child's heartbeat." He paused and let that land. "There is nothing any of you can say to me tonight." Leo's mother began to cry. Real tears this time, Alina thought, though it was hard to be sure where the performance ended and the person began. She said she had only wanted what was best for her son. She said she had been afraid. She said that Alina had come from a different world and she had not known how to trust that. Alina looked at the woman who had slapped her not 30 minutes ago and felt something unexpected move through her. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something quieter than that. Something that felt like the moment you finally stop waiting for an apology that was never going to come and realize you do not need it to keep walking. Leo's father tried a different approach. He spoke about legacy, about the business, about everything he had built and what it meant to protect it. Leo listened to the whole thing without expression. Then he said 4 words. "The papers are filed." His father went still. Leo told the room, without heat and without hesitation, that he had begun liquidating his share of the family business that afternoon, that he and Alina were relocating, that their lawyers had already drafted the restraining order that would permanently bar both sets of grandparents from their child's life, not as punishment, as protection, because a child deserved to grow up without learning that love came with conditions and knives hidden inside it. Alina heard all of this and felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. She felt safe. Leo walked to her. He stood in front of her and looked at her face, her red cheek, her wet eyes, her hand still curved over the small round of her stomach. He took that hand gently in both of his. "Come with me," he said. They walked out together, not fast, not running. They walked out the way people walk when they have already decided, and the deciding is the hardest part, and that part is done. Behind them, the sound of voices rose again, Leo's name being called. Pleas and arguments and the kind of words people only find when they realize too late what they have destroyed. 2 of the guests near the door were quietly on their phones. The stranger stood very still near the back wall, flanked by the 2 men Leo had called in, going nowhere. Alina did not look back, not once. Outside, the night air was cool and soft against her face. She pressed her free hand flat over her stomach and breathed. The baby moved, just slightly, just enough, the way it sometimes did when she was very still. She thought about the girl she had been before any of this. The girl who had believed for years that she was the problem. That something fundamental inside her was broken and wrong, and that the people who made her feel that way were simply telling her the truth. She had spent so long inside that story that walking out of it had felt like learning to walk all over again. But she had done it. She had walked out, and then she had found Leo, and Leo had found her right back. They drove in silence for a long time. The city lights moved past the windows, and Alina watched them without seeing them. She was somewhere else in her mind, somewhere quieter. Leo reached across and covered her hand with his without saying anything. She turned her palm over and held on. That night, Alina lost 2 families. She lost the parents who had chosen a stranger over her own blood, and she lost the in-laws who had done the same. She lost the house full of light and flowers and the anniversary she had spent weeks looking forward to. But she did not lose herself, and she did not lose him. And sitting in that car, 4 months pregnant, one cheek still faintly burning, heart still tender from everything that room had put it through, Alina Vasquez understood something she had been circling for years without quite reaching. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had simply been surrounded by people who needed her to believe that she was. She closed her eyes. She held Leo's hand. She let herself be carried forward into whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, forward felt like enough.